Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, yesterday we had the full patch notes revealed for Season 5, including all of the changes between the PTR and the live release of the season coming in just a few days. And we also got visuals for literally every single unique that has been changed, and there are honestly just a hell of a lot of them with massive changes. Some of these are just absolutely incredible and vast, and really sort of just shake things up for multiple classes in a way that turns things a little bit on their heads from all the testing that we've done on the PTR before this. That said, today we'll have a sort of discussion about my predicted contenders for the best builds for each class based on how they performed in the PTR, and then just how all of that interacts with any bug fixes, class changes, or item changes within these patch notes. In alphabetical class order then, let's start with Barbarian. For most types of content in the game, whirlwind builds are going to be king. They have made this skill able to scale with attack speed now, which creates a whole lot of new synergy, and they've also fixed the Dust Devil glyph being broken in the Paragon board as well, which means that they scale properly, and with these things combined so that you actually use Dust Devil Whirlwind instead of Bleed Whirlwind like we used to, it should do a ton of damage with ridiculous speed too for clearing easier content. The only real way that this will get overtaken by other builds is likely to be for things like pushing the very highest tiers of the Artificer's Pit activity, or possibly the higher tiers of the Infernal Horde, where the best Barbarian builds in the PTR were Bash and Bleed builds, but Bleed builds have some pretty high potential new unique changes to go with them too, so I would give them the edge for sure. If I had to pick a sort of dark horse that I'm hoping does better than I expected to, it would be Upheaval with the new Hellhammer changes especially. I love the idea of scaling both the size of Upheaval and the fire on the ground as well, but also scaling the fire damage with your main stat, but it's hard to know exactly how this one will do until it is fully built around and played with in game. Moving to our next class then, we have Druid, my first love within Diablo 4, and on the PTR the best build was pretty undeniably the Landslide Druid, which has arguably gotten only better in the patch due to changes to uniques, including Insatiable Fury now giving up to 5 ranks to werebear skills, as well as getting other buffs, and in combination with Vasili's Prayer, which of course does make earth skills count as bear skills so that this synergy works out, but importantly has also been changed to have much stronger affixes on it, and even more importantly, instead of giving you a flat small amount to fortify when you cast a werebear skill, it instead will now give you up to 5% of your maximum health as fortify, which increases your survivability in the build a pretty insane amount, as well as stacking with our gaining damage with earth skills while fortified too. Basically, this just stacks the growing number of ways to cause bonus casts of Landslide, with the Changeling's Debt aspect increasing werebear skill damage, which in this case is earth skills as well when applied to poison enemies, which we do with Poison Creeper, the companion skill. Then we have the Pack Leader Spirit Boon, which is a lucky hit chance to reset companion skill cooldowns on each crit you get, which are thousands of landslides absolutely crit often to cause. It's pretty hard to imagine any other Druid build will compare to this, really, just based on how good this already was looking and the further buffs it has received. However, a mixed Lightning Storm and Cataclysm build is also just looking better and better by the day, with tons of buffs going into this in the patch notes specifically. So this one could be a bit of a sleeper pick, honestly. And I would also, of course, be remiss not to mention that Boulder Druid just got a significant bump in this patch that it did not have on the PTR. This was always one of my favorite Druid concepts, and it has just received a number of buffs, especially in these new patch notes, increasing the base damage of the skill underneath all other bonuses that multiply it. They've also fixed bonus boulders breaking with the Dolmen Stone unique, which was a major issue last season, and they've tertiarily also made the aspect that turns Boulder into a core skill no longer remove its original Wrath tag, so it now benefits from both core and Wrath upgrades, which is another pretty big bonus to it too. Third up then is Necromancer, and while for every other class I generally have a lot of options to talk about due to the changes that have been made, I'm still only hearing one thing mainly from Necromancers, which is Bone Spirit, Bone Spirit, Bone Spirit. This won't be the case in early game necessarily, but of all current Necromancer builds, this just scales ridiculously powerfully with the high stat breakpoints that you can reach with endgame masterworking, because it needs loads of resource generation, critical chance, and critical damage to really hit its stride at its peak. That said, it is basically just the hardest hitting option that Necromancer has after the nerfs to minions and Shadow Blight, and the Holy Bolt's Elixir being done for too. Past that, there are a ton of buffs to blood builds in this most recent addition to the patch notes, but while they may be one of the upper tier Necro builds after this, I do still doubt that they will overtake Bone Spirit even still. Then we have Rogue, and this is sort of opposite problem of Necromancer, where there are just so many builds with ridiculous potential currently for this class. On the PTR, the pretty much indisputably top build was Penetrating Shots, though Rapid Fire was close with a bit of a bug. It just has a massive amount of crowd control potential to actually control enemies and keep them from killing you, combined with tons of bonus damage to crowd controlled enemies too. Effective use of the Ring of Starless Skies Mythic Unique as well, which yes, we will be considering here because you can get a guaranteed Mythic Unique of your choice once per season quite easily now, and then then changes in the patch notes just reinforce this even further, including big buffs to the Ring of Starless Skies, which this already benefited from massively. While this will take some testing to find out, Eaglehorn got a massive buff from this final set of changes too between the PTR and live release, and may actually be worth using in the penetrating shots builds now with its changed affixes and the vastly stronger unique effect, which may also put us into using the buffed Condemnation Dagger in this setup if we drop the expectant aspect to begin with. That's getting a little bit too technical now, we don't really know all that stuff until we test it, but the point is that the build was already insanely powerful in the PTR, probably the best in the game, honestly, in that game state, and while the old setup hasn't seen a lot of changes since then, other items have been significantly buffed that could well make their way in and increase the power of this build even more. Aside from that though, pretty much every rogue core skill has a really high tier build right now, especially with these changes to the Ring of Starless Skies, Rapid Fire and Barrage for similar reasons to penetrating shots, and now Flurry, which got buffed a ton before the PTR, and has seen even further buffs before this patch to the live server. The potential sleeper hit though for Rogue is simply a Rain of Arrows focused build. They did a massive change to the unique built around this skill, and until we are able to actually mess with it in game, it is hard to predict just how strong this will turn out to be, but I do have a lot of hope for it, as an ultimate spam build is always a really fun concept, especially now that this has a chance to fire bonus Rain of Arrows when you fire Rain of Arrows. Finally then, let's talk about the Sorcerer, which got possibly the largest amount of changes to both the class and especially the uniques in this final bit of changes before the season goes live. The best build in Season 4, after the Infinite Flame Shield loop was patched out of course, and then in the BTR as well, is Blizzard, and this has seen further potential buffs with the Blue Rose Unique getting a lot of love and increases for the sort of sub-power that it buffs, but this creates a lot of tension with the build though as well, because you already wanted to use the Tal Rasha's unique ring, generally for just a ton of damage increases as a whole, and especially after this patch, the Ring of Starless Skies is an incredible ring for most builds in the game. So the question becomes which two of these three rings you actually want to use, because you can't use all three, and if another build can overtake this because of this inability to put all the buffs you want on at the same time, then that might change things up too. That said, Arclash basic skill builds are always super reliable. It'll always be near the top if it isn't the top, especially now with the new Crown of Lucian helm and Shard of Varathiel sword uniques stacking up together to significantly buff more basic skill focused builds. That said, just a couple of hours ago we actually had additions to these patch notes featuring all of the changes to new items between the PTR and the live season launch, and of all the items, that one that has been nerfed the hardest is probably the Crown of Lucian, having changes to its affixes and effect numbers which do change the way that the item works, but more importantly, losing that initial baseline 75% resource cost reduction that this had on the PTR, which was a massive part of what made this work. The damage bonus that it gives you is still huge, especially for a helmet, but the question is simply whether or not you can build in enough resource generation to actually make this properly worth using now. The next one, especially now that its specific unique has been fixed up in this patch, and the bugs were removed around it too from the PTR, is Chain Lightning, which can see a very top tier spot for Sorcerer builds this season, especially as it has potential to scale extremely well with endgame upgrades like tempering and masterworking with good RNG. That said, the potential newcomer that really needs some testing this season is Fireball. They buffed the hell out of Fireball in this final set of changes, especially by boosting two separate Fireball uniques to give it insanely increased attack speed, to make it return mana on each Fireball explosion, and to also just to have the effect of the bouncing Fireballs not even reduce their damage at all if you get it at a high roll of the unique effect. So overall, this has been given an absolutely ridiculous buff. It's just a matter of seeing how that makes this build compare to the more standard standouts among Sorcerer setups. And it's also worth just sort of dropping the fun little hint that the Isadora's Overflowing Cameo unique is now actually genuinely extremely high potential. It just has massive changes to the way it works, but it is just so different from the way it worked before that there's no possible pre-patch comparison. So we just won't know it all until it actually gets some proper testing with the training dummies and such on the season when it's live. That just about does it for today, everyone. Just a discussion and a bit of fun just predicting what are likely to be the best builds and build concepts for each class in the longer term gameplay of Season 5. Of course, this isn't in relation to leveling builds, as what is strong early is very different from what will be strong late, but these are all the things that are looking like they have the strongest potential to scale into the endgame very well, when tempering, greater affixes, and especially masterworking bonuses are included in all of it as well. I hope you've all enjoyed this video then, and I wish you luck in the time remaining until the release of the season in just a few days. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.